Get finished?
That's good.
You get paid? Yeah, that's the thing. Work in my house.
You did a nice job.
Oh my God.
Thank you. Is that Arate?
Yeah, Arate, can you mute the audio from your screen?
Yes. Yes, I can.
I don't know. See it's
Would you?
Yeah.
The YouTube video that you have open.
There was no conversation.
Yeah.
Can you
Handled it
close
through
that?
the executive.
What do you want me to do?
Can you close that video?
Close it out?
Yes.
Oh, this
And what do you want me to do? Reopen it again?
No, because you can just listen through the phone, because we're getting feedback on our end.
What are you getting feedback from?
From the video.
Yeah, I can hear screeching sounds in the background, like.
Yeah, it's your call. You have the video open, so you want to close that.
Yeah. So you want me to just listen on the phone?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. That sounds all.
What caused that YouTube to do that?
It's because it's playing over and over again in the phone. We're picking up on that audio.
Oh, okay.
So, but it should be good now. So.
All right, so I can't see what's going on, just listen. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. It's live right now.
All right. Oh, okay. Thanks, TJ.
Yeah.
1 second.
Okay.
TJ's going to set up the projector.
Do you want to do anything right now? Or?
Nope.
Okay. All right. Everybody ready? Okay. All right. Welcome everyone to the Wednesday, November 18th regular school committee meeting. We are live streaming and recording this meeting. Due to COVID restrictions, we don't have any public audience, but tonight with us by invitation are two of the SABs, Nicole Masai and Olivia Richards. Welcome. And also the middle school principal, Phil McManus.
Yeah, Phil's here, but
Want to
just
say
say Arte's.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of our members, Arate Pasucci, is joining us via telephone, and Tasha Cooper had a scheduling conflict, so she is not here tonight. I'm going to move right into the agenda, onto comments from the audience. We have not yet figured out a way to take live public comment at these meetings, so we will continue with the procedure that we've used at our last several in-person meetings, and we will read the emails that were sent in to us. As is the case with in-person and Zoom comments from the audience, the committee won't respond to these email comments after they are read. The committee may choose to address the topics raised through an agenda item later in the meeting or at a future meeting. So this week we have 4 emails. I'm going to read the first couple, and then a couple members are going to help me with the other 2. The first one is from Michelle and Jeffrey Bonner. Dear school committee members and administrators, we are writing out of concern for our Masconomic community. We all must acknowledge that we are now in a second wave of the pandemic, which will continue and most likely will be worse than in the spring. We also must acknowledge that the country as a whole, including our community, has pandemic fatigue. Even those who follow all CDC guidance are more apt to make slip-ups at this point. We also must acknowledge that although all experts are recommending that families celebrate Thanksgiving in person only with the people that they're living with, we know that many will not follow this guidance. This has been acknowledged over social media as well as in the news. The Tri-Town is no different than other communities in this way. For all of our teachers and staff who come in on a daily basis to Masco to ensure the possibility of a choice of hybrid for the students, and for all the students, both hybrid and remote, and for the Tri-Town community at large, as well as those communities in which teachers and staff live in, please transition Masco to remote only for the 2 weeks following the Thanksgiving weekend. This action could prevent cases at Masco and in our communities. An ounce of prevention really is worth a pound of cure. Please let a respect for public health and an acknowledgement of human behavior drive this decision. The next one is from Sharon Richard of Topsfield. I'm interested in understanding what constitutes instructional time for the required 5.5 hours a day in the high school. The feedback I get from my son, who is in mostly CP classes in 10th grade, is that he is often able to get his homework done during class time, at least 10 minutes during class, sometimes more. It seems he doesn't have much homework left after school. Also, there have been a number of classes where the teacher is not present at all. I understand that there are not many subs, but am wondering how often this is occurring. And lastly, how is the school preparing for going back to fully in person, either in the spring if possible, or at least next fall? Thank you. Kristen is going to read the next one.
Thank you, Carolyn. This letter is from Gretchen Fishman of Oxford. Thank you for the opportunity to submit comments for tonight's meeting. My comments tonight are informed by my role as a parent and are not meant to represent the Tri-Town CPAC. I would like to again raise my concern on the struggles Blackboard is presenting for students. I had flagged this issue in September regarding special education. At the time, my typical learner was complaining about the challenge of navigating her classes, as each course had a unique approach to the organization of assignments, announcements, and content within Blackboard. We have many students in our district who have executive functioning deficits, and if this is creating issues for our typical learners, then it certainly poses an additional unnecessary cognitive stress for students with disabilities. While this issue has been present since remote learning was implemented, I have been hearing more concern about this issue, both as a community member and a CPAC board member, now that we have added the additional challenges our current hybrid model presents. I'd like to point out to the committee that despite the child find law, there are still students that are not identified as needing 504 and/or IEP services until they reach middle or high school. These children are at particular risk for struggling under the current circumstances. It is important to note that many individuals with specific learning disabilities and neurodiversities have difficulty with executive functioning skills, communication skills, emotional regulation, cognitive flexibility, and social skills. We know this, and yet the system we have in place is difficult to navigate and is frustrating for both students and parents. Additionally, I have had the opportunity to use Blackboard for an IEP meeting. As a parent, I found the inability to see all speakers challenging. It was impossible to read the room because there are only 4 users visible at a time, and some staff kept their cameras off while speaking. I can only imagine how difficult this must be for teachers when they are trying to teach and connect with their students. While I have heard that Blackboard hoped to increase the capabilities of their video conferencing tools, this has not yet happened, and the current means of communication is less than ideal for all involved. I recognize that the administration and staff face a myriad of difficulties implementing less than ideal educational models during a pandemic. While we can't change the circumstances we've been given, we can work continuously to improve the way we overcome the obstacles they present. We cannot allow our most vulnerable students to continue to fall behind. This will take not only an educational toll, but also an emotional toll, leading us down a path of losing kids to school frustration, trauma, poor grades, and low self-esteem that they may not be able to bounce back from. Dr. Ross Green said, "Kids do well if they can." We need to make sure all of our students can. It may seem like Blackboard is an irrelevant piece of the puzzle, but providing a predictable, coordinated, across all departments, and user-friendly platform that is accessible to our most at-risk students will allow access for all, and could help lead the way to greater success for many of our students. Lastly, it would greatly behoove the district to bring in landmark outreach professional development for all staff. It is more important than ever to be sure we are using best practice in order to reach our struggling students. Dr. Harvey was successful in getting Landmark to Hamilton Wenham during his tenure there, and surely he would agree that once new strategies were implemented, there was improved access to content for all students. Thank you, Gretchen Fishman. And she provided a link to Landmark.
Thank you. And the last one Zilly is going to read.
This letter is from the Varsity Field Hockey Team. Dear Masconomet School Committee members, we offer our sincerest gratitude to all of you for approving our season this fall. We truly appreciate your understanding that playing on frozen grass in February would not have been a viable option for us. Your unanimous vote allowing us to play resulted in better academic achievement and mental health for all of us. We just completed our undefeated season, 10-0. We proudly represented the Masconomet community both on and off the field. Being able to play gave us a sense of purpose as well as incredible joy to work together as a team. Our success would not have been possible without your support, and we thank you for allowing us to compete. Sincerely, all of the team players. The captains are Carolyn McSweeney and Andrea Walker. Should I read them?
Sure.
Allison Baker, Caitlin Caffrey, Kenzie Carey, Ava Collins, Lily Conway, Julia Graves, Ainsley Greener, Kaylee Lucas, Kaylee Monagle, Nina Morris, Greta Mowers, Cecily Pagliarani, Maggie Sturgis, Ava Tello, Riley Trodden, Olivia White, and Kate Zamani.
That's nice.
And they're actually hand signed.
It's a real letter. Thank you. Okay, so that's it for comments that I received via email. So we'll move on to the middle school principal report with Phil.
Okay, so we are ready to go here. Thanks for having me tonight. Not that I have a choice to attend, but I'm here, so thank you. Always good to start with a little joke. So I have a general update here for you to get started, and I think that the pros and cons last time worked out pretty well, so we'll go with that again. I do want to say that teachers and students seem to have settled into a routine right now. We're about a month or so into the hybrid learning model, and so far it seems to be going pretty well. Students have been very compliant with social distancing and mask wearing while they're in the building. In the cafeteria, I think that's one of the biggest places where we had some worry prior to the hybrid model starting, and students have been very good with it. In the hallways, you don't have as many students passing, so that helps a lot. Kids have been doing a good job staying to the right, staying in single file line and keeping distance between themselves, and teachers have been keeping on top of it as well. And then attendance is very good, and I'll show you some data for the attendance coming up. But our attendance between remote learners and students in the building has been very good, much better than year over year. Not to say it was bad before, but students have been coming to school. Coming is obviously defined either on Blackboard or in the building, but it has been going well in that respect. So the cons, and you may have heard some of this already, but there is definitely a general stress among teachers as instruction is much harder in this environment. Teaching students who are at home as well as students who are in front of you is a difficult task. I do want to commend our teachers for really doing their best and rising to the challenge. I hear a lot of positive comments from students and from parents that teachers are working very hard and that students are working hard along with their teachers. and that given the circumstances, things are going, I think, as relatively as best as they can. Students are feeling stressed about grades, and there is still a pressure to achieve while learning in the pandemic. Coming into Masco as a new principal this year, of course, I heard about the academic success here and the achievement and the strive for strong grades. And although in middle school the pressure might not be there quite as much as high school, because you don't have SATs, you don't have college acceptances, you don't have grades counting in the same way, there's definitely still a pressure there. And I want to acknowledge that, and students are definitely feeling that. And then as I just said, it's a lesser extent in the middle school compared to the high school. And then finally, students randomly taking remote days has been a little bit of a challenge as far as taking attendance on a daily basis. And if a parent chooses to keep their child home that week or that day and then not call the office, it's a little bit of a difficulty to kind of chase that student down and make sure that they are checking in for their classes and that they are present remotely. And that's separate from a student who may be in quarantine because of a close contact. I mean just the random remote days. And I know that Peter Delaney talked about this as well for the high school during his last time in front of this group. But we're making it work, and I think we're getting into more of a groove now. So attendance by date, this is almost doesn't seem true if you've been in education or you've been on the school committee for a long time or whatever the case may be, to see these numbers. Typically year over year, it's more like low 90% that we have students here for attendance. But these past 4 days up through yesterday, you can see we're almost 99% every day, and then 97% attendance one other day. Below that, our average daily remote learners, it's 65% of the student body on any given day are remote learning. We have approximately 100 students who are assigned fully remote. I shouldn't say approximately, it is 100 students assigned fully remote. So based only on those assignments to fully remote, we should be at 58% of students remotely learning. So you can see that we have 7% of students on any given day are choosing to be remote. And that's something that we didn't necessarily anticipate, but we know that it was something that was a possibility. We'll see how that holds as we move forward here going into the winter. So changing gears a bit here as far as things coming up, the next big quote-unquote event is our parent conferences on December 10th. Those are fully virtual. Guidance is working with the teams to identify students and pre-register for them for the conferences. And specifically, that would be our students that the teams feel they really would like to connect with the parents and speak to them, or guardians or caregivers that night. And then we'll open it up to the general public for online signups on December 2nd. We do have a limited number of spots, and that's just by virtue of the amount of time that we have and the assigned time that we have for each family to be able to meet with the child's teachers. We are running those through Blackboard. It will be a similar setup that we had for the open house parent night that we had at the beginning of the school year. And I think it will run seamlessly as far as that goes. And I think it's important that we're still providing that opportunity for parents/guardians to connect with their teachers and talk about students' progress. It is later than we would normally conduct these in a non-pandemic year. However, it works out well because it's right after the first trimester ends and shortly after grades are posted to PowerSchool. So teachers and families will have that information to discuss as students are starting up in the second trimester. Special education, I don't want to steal Patty's thunder by any means, so I'll make this brief. But we have identified our next cohort of students to attend in person 5 days a week. The assistant superintendent, so Patty, she's already contacted families and sent out letters. And our goal is for those students to attend full-time beginning on November 30th. It is a small group of students. It's between 12 and 14 children, but we think that it will be really beneficial to be able to bring these students into the building full-time. Citizenship workshops, I talked a little bit about this at the beginning of the school year, and it's something that Mr. Monagle and I did virtually when we were in the remote learning environment. The difficulty we've had in the past month has been that it's hard to find time in the schedule to be able to conduct these, since we don't have every period scheduled for a class. But building off of the work last year and early this year, we do plan to reintroduce these to students for the 8th graders, and then introduce them officially to the 7th graders. With that being said, we're going to continue with the school year themes that I've already presented to the community of the culture of kindness. It's already been in place here, building off of that, and then patience and resiliency. We also want to continue with our guidance program that's been conducted in a limited fashion so far, but being able to present that to a wider audience virtually. The hope is that we'll be able to we'll conduct this during our regular periods, during whatever class it may be that I identify, or if we are able to bring back a WIN block to the schedule, we would be able to conduct it during one of those WIN times. And then just to show you a few fun photos, I can go through these quickly. On the left-hand top side there, that's one of the coffee paintings from the art class, and that's modeled after an Italian artist who quote-unquote spills her cup of coffee, or in this case the students, and then they use coffee to actually create or paint these pictures. So those are really neat. There's some of those hanging in the hallway. On the top right there, that's one of our students, Owen Walsh, and I spoke to his mom to get permission to use the picture. He's at home baking brownies. However, on the other side of that laptop is one of our teachers, Dana Fowler, who's conducting one of our Excel's cooking classes virtually. So kids log in when they get home, and then they cook brownies, or this past week I think they made an apple pie, and coming up they've got something else. So that's been a big success. Kids have enjoyed it. I told them, I joined one of the first groups that they had, and I said, if you're baking brownies right now, you better drop some off my office. I didn't get any yet. Down on the bottom, a couple of classroom pics. What's that?
You may be lucky.
Down on the bottom, a couple of classroom pictures there from Spanish, and I think maybe one of the art classes. So kids are having fun in school, and they're still connecting virtually or remotely, and they're producing some good work. So there's definitely some positives there. And in closing, I think that what we need to keep in mind is we're constantly reassessing, and we're adjusting as we need to. We are working on the schedule and being able to find some time in there, whether it be to provide a WIN block, find some time to people or students and teachers to breathe during the day. We're finding ways to include SEL in our program through our citizenship workshops or our guidance programs. And we need to recognize that this is not a normal year and make adjustments to address that. One of those is the conversation that I've started to have with our teachers about grading, and how it's just not business as usual in the past, and I think that they've been receptive to that. But they need to hear it from me, and hear it from administration, that it's okay to make adjustments. It's okay to maybe not do things how you did it in the past, and recognize that this has been an extraordinary time. We started school 2 weeks late. We started in fully remote with a different schedule. Now we're in the 7-day or 7-period schedule, and we realize that there's been a lot of pivots. There's been a lot of adjustments. Students are only in school in the building half the time, and if they're not fully remote already. So we have to keep that in mind as we are moving forward here. So that covers it for me for the middle school. Thanks.
I have a question.
Yes.
So you said there were 100 students that are full remote now.
Right.
When we went hybrid, how many students were remote at that point?
So students that were assigned fully remote, I don't have that data right in front of me, but it wasn't much lower than that. I think we started with about 75 or 80, I want to say. So we have had more choose to go fully remote since we've started. But more of that has been students that aren't officially choosing remote, but are opting into remote on a given day or week.
Phil, do you have much direct experience with Blackboard here? Or do you have any feedback you hear from
Do
teachers?
I have personal experience with it here?
Or in your prior life before Masco?
I didn't use Blackboard prior to Masco, so I didn't have experience before.
Did you use something other than Blackboard, or?
Last year when I was in Marblehead, we were using Google Classroom and Zoom.
Okay.
So I didn't have experience prior to this. I mean, so far I do like Blackboard. I do recognize there are some limitations, but I like how everything is tied together into one system. And I haven't really heard, at least in the middle school, that there's been a lot of problems navigating through it. And I think teachers have worked really closely with their students to help them learn how to use it.
Okay, I asked because we did get that one comment tonight, and then there were a couple comments that were said at the listening session that Bonnie and her team hosted on Monday night, so I was just curious. I don't want to...
I mean, I think there are strengths and limitations to any system that schools are using this year. The nice thing about Blackboard is it is very secure, so we haven't experienced any Zoom bombing type episodes that you hear about with other schools, and I actually had to investigate last year. In my prior position, we had one. So that's been very good. You know, Google Classroom has limitations as well, and that can be very overwhelming for students and for teachers, and I heard complaints about that. So I don't think that there's any, one system that's going to be perfect. I think that Blackboard has a lot of advantages for us, but recognize too that there are limitations with it.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything for Phil? All right.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us, even though you had to.
You're welcome.
All right, we'll move on to Mike's superintendent update.
Okay. So first off, to sort of echo what Phil said, we actually on Friday will finish our 5th week in the hybrid model. And we're going to talk a little bit about how we've been doing relative to COVID in the schools. In that 5 weeks time, we've had a total of 8 positive cases in the school community. This number includes students in our hybrid cohorts, students in our fully remote cohort, faculty, and support staff. So 8 total positive cases in 5 weeks. Of these cases, only 1 was determined to be present in the building while infectious. And because of that, we then went through our process and identified close contacts of that person who then needed to quarantine. The majority of our positive cases to date have been students in our fully remote cohort. So students who have never been in the school. That's the majority of our cases. In the very rare instances where a COVID-19 positive person was in school while infectious, we have no evidence of any close contacts becoming infected. So we don't have any evidence of spread going on in the schools at all right now. And as you heard Phil said, the kids have been really great about mask wearing, about distancing in the hallways. I mean, it's been, the kids have done everything and even more, relative to our expectations for them getting back into school. So it's gone really well from that perspective. We also have approximately 30 individuals who have been identified as close contacts, and this could be from outside the building as well, who are in quarantine at the moment. And I'll say a lot of them like soccer. So again, numbers have been pretty good so far, knock on wood. I also want to remind the community about our process for handling the report of an infected individual. We're following the protocols for responding to COVID-19 scenarios, which were issued by the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education on July 17th, 2020. They were also updated on September 14th. And given some of the information that came out from the governor's press conference today, I expect them to get updated again. There's been some changes to the close contact process, so we may have to change our process a little bit. But as of this morning, as this process, in this process that's put forth by DESE, positive test results are reported to local boards of health through the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. The local board of health or the Massachusetts Community Tracing Collaborative then contacts the individual with the positive test in order to identify any close contacts of this individual. The Masconomet District assists the local board of health with the identification of potential close contacts, but it's really the local board of health that makes that determination on who meets that definition and who does not. So we work with the Board of Health. Actually, every time we get a positive case notice, we call a team together. District administration's on it. Our school nurses are part of that team. The Boxford Board of Health is part of that team. The Boxford Town Administrator is on that team. Scott Morrison, Superintendent of Chi-Town, is part of that team. And then we bring other people in as needed. If the student lives in a town that's not Boxford, we actually call their public health officials in as well. And we all sit down and say, okay, what do we have? And then let's talk about potential close contacts. And really, we have a good exchange with the public health officials of the community to make sure that we're identifying people that need to be identified. And then our nurses help with, contact information and things like that to get on that follow-up. So the process is pretty involved, and every time we have a case, it's an hour-long meeting at least.
It's really good.
But it's good.
Really thorough.
But it's been working pretty well. So again, I think we're doing really well on this area right now. Keep our fingers crossed. Exactly. So next I want to talk about the schedule for next week. So November 23rd and 24th, next Monday and Tuesday are full school days, and we're going to follow our regular hybrid schedule on those days. Students in Cohort A will attend school in person on Monday. Students in Cohort B will attend in person on Tuesday, the 24th. And then Wednesday, November 25th, that's traditionally the half day before Thanksgiving. We're going to make that a full remote day for all students. So no student will attend in person on Wednesday. Still a half day. And we'll have a 4-period schedule from 7:35 until 10:50 in the morning. Just a reminder, students are all expected to attend all of their classes remotely through Blackboard. Teachers will be taking period attendance and reporting student absences from class as usual. And we'll return to school on Monday, November 30th, with Cohort A attending in person and Cohort B attending remotely that day on the 30th. I want to say, as families consider their Thanksgiving plans, I'd ask them all to please keep the recommendations from the Mass Department of Public Health regarding Thanksgiving celebrations in mind. As I just said, we've been very fortunate to have a relatively low number of cases in the school community, and our ability to remain in a hybrid model depends on the continued cooperation of our families with those state and public health guidelines. Moving on, I'm going to give an update on the hybrid schedule. So members of the executive leadership team and the Masconomet Teachers Association, the Education Association, have met 4 times since the end of October, since October 27th, to discuss changes to the hybrid schedule. I'm happy to announce that yesterday we reached an agreement on an addition to the wind block in our schedule. And we'll be communicating the details around this change to the community in the next few days. We're still kind of ironing out the language. And hopefully we'll be ready to implement the wind block on Monday, November 30th. We've also scheduled a meeting for early December to continue exploring more substantial changes around the hybrid schedule. So stay tuned. All right. Moving on to standardized testing that's coming up. While the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education canceled the MCAS test administration last spring for all of our sophomores, it did not relieve these students of the requirement that they pass the MCAS in order to achieve a high school diploma. So we've received notice from the department that all of our current juniors will be given the MCAS test during the week of January 18th, 2021. I'm shaking my head too, Kristen, I agree. Is that
midterm week too?
It would traditionally have been midterm week. We had actually, with everything going on, had done away with midterms, but thanks, Desi, they put it right back there. Additionally, we've received notice from the College Board that the PSAT will be administered for juniors on Tuesday, January 26th. So that's, if you think about our calendar, Martin Luther King Day is the Monday of that week, and then there's 4 days that we're going to give MCAS testing. In our regular calendar, the following Monday is the Teacher in Service Day at the end of the semester. That's the 25th. And then Tuesday, January 26th, we'll be giving PSATs to juniors. Given our social distancing and space requirements, all other students in the district will be learning remotely beginning on Tuesday, January 19th, and they'll return to the hybrid in-person learning on Wednesday, January 27th, in order to facilitate the MCAS and PSAT testing for our juniors. Yeah. It's a really interesting thing. We're also looking at those students who have opted fully remote have some really solid reasons as to why they're not coming back in the building, and they're going to miss a chance to actually pass the MCAS and get their competency determination. If they stay out, if those students choose to stay out for the rest of this year, they won't have another opportunity until next fall to take the test, and they'll be seniors. So.
If they're fully remote, can they opt in to take it?
They can.
Okay.
Yeah, they can, but I know some students have some pretty specific health reasons that, you know, are keeping them out of school, which makes a lot of sense. The department has, in its wisdom, has not really thought about this, I think. And as I said, given all of the issues around serving students lunch and space and everything else, the only way we can really make this work is have everybody else stay home, because we're going to use the field house to administer the test.
Makes sense.
All right.
It doesn't make sense, but that
It doesn't make sense that we have to do it, but this is the only way we feel like we can make it work and keep everybody safe and make sure people get fed and all of those other things. So, last piece, plans for winter weather. Because of our ability to quickly change modes from hybrid to remote, school will not be canceled outright in the event of inclement weather this year. As students and faculty all have the ability to continue instruction electronically, we'll institute remote learning days when weather conditions make physically commuting to school hazardous. The decision to institute a remote learning day will be communicated through the same channels as prior years. So we'll use the media, Twitter and the local news media, and also our Blackboard telephone and email communication systems to let everyone know. The only thing that would cause us to cancel school is if there's a significant power outage. So that would do it. What we're trying to avoid here is tacking school days on to the end of the year in June, where if we can get away with a remote day, we don't have to do that. So that's the plan.
Mike, do you have an idea of what significant is?
For power outages?
Yeah, well, yes.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to look at it.
Oxford has some streets that regularly you might have 100 to 200 houses out, and they're usually last on the list to get fixed. So I'm just, what's significant, and then what happens to the kids who just can't do it because they have no power?
It's, you know, if we were to have, you know, what's significant, as I said, it would be enough students that it would really impact us, impact through access. I would think, you know, usually I consult, National Grid has a pretty good map that they put up, so you can see how many outages there are in a community and things like that. So that would be what would help me to make that determination. And what we would wind up doing is if we did hold remote school and students were blacked out, they would obviously have the opportunity to make work up. It wouldn't be a missed day for them.
Will there be sort of a different standard for going to a remote weather day? In the past, it was so much snow that you couldn't, get the kids to school.
Right.
With the buses having to have their windows open,
Right.
A cold, windy day may indicate remote learning for everyone.
That was today, kind of.
Yeah, I was going to say, what day isn't a cold, windy day? I mean, reason right now.
Well, if it's 20 below,
Yeah, it's
Yeah, I
different.
think we'd have to look at it within reason. I
don't
think
want these kids soft.
however, one of the things we have realized is those buses are running pretty empty right now. I mean, we're talking, so what we're seeing is most students are being driven to school by their parents, or driving themselves. So, but I think it's still, thinking about first, usually with a snow cancellation, is it safe to drive here? It's the first consideration. So.
With busing, when we last talked about the lake bus, we only had 4 days with one student. Has that changed any since
I don't
then?
know.
I saw multiple students getting on the late buses yesterday. I didn't count them, but it caught my eye because
That's nice to hear.
yeah.
And finally, following up on what Joe asked Phil, has the all remote total students of the district increased from the beginning of the hybrid
Oh, yes.
significantly?
Yeah. I think the middle school has stayed relatively consistent. Phil had said around 80. The number we can have in my mind was around 91 was the last time I looked. This was earlier, week 1 or 2. And he said they're sitting at about 100 right now. And then, from Pete Delaney's presentation a couple of weeks ago, what we've seen is 9th graders have stayed pretty consistent. 10th graders, you see a slight increase in the number of kids. Then juniors and seniors have really been the ones that have kind of said, I think I'm going to opt out. So.
Okay, so who's driving themselves to school if the juniors and
The
seniors
lot,
are all opting for it?
The lot is very empty. If somebody needs a parking permit, they should go ask. Jeff and I said that yesterday, I think. We were looking out the window going, wow, there's not,
A lot more empty than
there's a lot of empty spaces out there.
October 19th.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, I can't remember what the numbers were back in September, October when we did this survey. But we're running at about a third, and a third right now.
So any junior can cut off that. I
It
mean,
was-
obviously
we
they
had,
have
we
to
had
be able to
opened it up
drive.
to juniors for parking.
It's
Already.
open to juniors.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it's, if any
It's
of them
fully,
didn't.
it's wide open to everybody at
Okay.
this point.
Any 16-year-old freshman can drive
Yeah,
themselves.
anybody with a driver's license.
Okay.
Can't ask.
Is that,
That's it.
that's the
Mike?
update?
Yeah.
I got a question. Based on that, I was going to ask the same question again, just because I looked at the percentage of parents that wanted everybody to go back to school.
Yep.
And then all this started happening, and now everybody's opting out and going remote again.
Right.
Is it right to think, or can we think that we will possibly get back within the next year full in school, or at least the opportunity? And if so, are there going to be any restrictions where right now it seems like all they need is an email and they can stay out of school, or they can go remote?
I don't know. I would hope we're going to be back full in September. It's a crystal ball for right now. I don't know, what kind of certainty I have behind that hope. And the ability to opt out was built into this by the Department of Education. And that was part of the parameters they set on everybody when developing plans, that we had to give people the ability to choose to stay out fully remotely. So I don't know, and they had actually even talked about, for this year at least, about, what they were expecting to be a reasonable amount of time before you could say to somebody, yes, you can go, or yet you can come back. Because there is, a little bit of transition time that we need to prepare for, to make sure, if somebody decided to come back, we got to make sure the classes are all still, the right numbers. Right now, the numbers are low enough that I think they'll be fine. But those were considerations that we had to think about, and that was all baked in there by the Department of Education. So I don't know what they're going to tell us for September right now.
Anyone else? Melissa?
Yeah, speaking about the Department of Education throwing things at you, I saw today that they announced that schools would be given the opportunity to participate in a program, a testing program.
Yeah.
Is that something Mass is going to look at? I don't necessarily know that there's a need, because I read that you have to be symptomatic.
Right. So when they offered that, I think probably about at least 3 weeks ago now, that they originally told districts this was in the offing. We discussed it at the time. Again, we have 8 cases today. On Monday we had 5. So the numbers were so small, and it was going right about the same time we were moving into hybrid. So we said, you know what, let's not throw our hat in with the first group. But I'm waiting to see what the results are, or, the feedback that comes back from the field about how this is all working out. And no, I wouldn't say it's, I would say it's something we would consider if it makes sense for us.
Silly?
When you were just talking about how the option for taking remote days as needed for when quarantining, I did wonder, right now with the holidays, it's actually someone in their letter had asked about that period of time coming up between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I know we had a situation this week with my own family where we were going to be seeing my elderly father. And so we opted to have a remote day simply because we're very careful with him. And so we were just, you minimize risk where you can. That's sort of the game this whole year, is you minimize risk where you can so that you can do what you need to do when you need to do it. I'm wondering if there are people who feel that they're going to be at a higher risk off campus during the holidays, and they felt for the safety of their peers that they should be avoiding coming in, but they don't want to. But are they better off staying in their hybrid cohort and being remote present because of that reason, or would it be better for your management for them to go become a cohort B student?
For a short term, I think they could just continue to stay in their cohort but attend remote. If they're thinking about it for more than a couple of weeks, then changing over to cohort B would make sense. That's the nice thing about the system that we have, is that it allows that kind of fluid movement back and forth between in person and fully remote, and there isn't, we don't have to wait more than a couple of days. That's, as the commissioner had said, well, you can hold somebody, you can take up to 3 weeks to allow somebody to move back and forth. And we kind of talked about it. It's like, that's not acceptable. So I think, we've got a couple of day turnaround time, especially coming back from D to one of the 2 cohorts. But as we've seen, this phenomenon where people were just kind of taking remote days was something I never thought of. I never thought it was even possible, but it is, and I think it presents some challenges for teachers in making sure they're getting their attendance right. But as you saw from Phil's numbers, we have better attendance now than we did before, and that's a good thing. That'll allowing people to, have that option and that flexibility seems to be working because we're getting more kids in school. So, as I said, more than a couple of weeks, you can go to D, but if it's 2 weeks, let the teacher know this is what you're doing and do it.
Yeah, and I was kind of just thinking out loud
Yeah.
about it, like with that, knowing that some people might have siblings coming home from college
Yep.
and just, they might feel that they need to be a little more thoughtful just for this
Mhm.
little period of time.
And that's good.
Yeah.
That's what we want.
I think there are people, we did the same thing because of my mother who lives alone and Thanksgiving. So for 2 weeks, we're keeping our son home. I'm wondering whether people are, like, leading into the holidays, watching the news, are going to say, have concerns about the community and not want to send their kids in between Thanksgiving and New Year's. I guess I was just raising that in case that presents logistical challenges for you. I could see people, I don't know, but I could see people saying, there's going to be a surge after Thanksgiving, I don't want to send my kid in.
Yeah.
That's just, so that's acceptable,
very well
and that's
be
what we
right,
have to deal with, yeah.
But as
Okay.
I said, I think our system is set up so
Yeah.
that it allows that
Yeah.
kind of fluid movement.
That's
and
great.
That's
Thank you.
good.
Yeah.
No, that's what we were, when we were meeting over the summer and talking
Yeah.
about this, it was one of the things that we really pushed on and said, it wasn't necessarily for this specific reason, but we were thinking of, we would potentially have to be quarantining large numbers of kids at a time.
Yeah.
And so we had to have this flexibility to be able to let kids come and go, based on those needs. So,
Yeah, thank you.
This is a little wider than that, but it makes sense to do it.
Let's hope that vaccine gets out sooner rather than later.
Come on, Moderna.
All right, we'll move on to Patty with the Student Services update.
Very good.
Thanks, Brad, found it. Tonight I'm going to give you a comprehensive update on Student Services Department. As our tree shows, we're comprised of several departments or areas of service, including special education, guidance services, counseling services, health services, special ed transportation, Title I, ELL services, and homeless services when necessary. Now more than ever, the services that we are providing support students academically, socially, and emotionally. Our students, like many in our country, are feeling the impact of COVID-19 and the impact it has had on teaching and learning. Beginning in March, with school closure, we continue to provide IEP services, conduct annual review meetings, and hold reevaluation and initial eligibility meetings. We convened 92 meetings, 81 annuals, 10 reevals, and 2 initials. IEP services were embedded in the schedule and continue to be provided within the remote schedule and now in the hybrid schedule. The summer program transpired virtually, and we received a lot of positive feedback from parents and students in regards to that program. So far this year, as of yesterday, we assigned several IEPs today. We've had 75 team meetings, 60 annuals, 8 reevals, and 7 initials. I had been asked at one point how many of the TTU evaluations were kind of postponed, and then NASCO is to be doing those, and it was about 12 evaluations that we had.
So Patty, are you caught up on where you think you should be team meeting wise? Like, I don't know what 75.
I would say that we are not caught
Sounds like a lot,
but
but-
we're catching up.
Okay, catching up? Okay,
Catching up.
thanks.
Our school psychologists have been great. They're working really hard, and along with Marie, so it's a part of what they're doing now.
Okay.
On October 5th, we welcomed back 2 cohorts of students to in-person learning 5 days a week, and now we're poised, as Phil had mentioned, to welcome back our next cohort of students beginning on Monday, November 30th, to in-person learning for 5 days a week. The students we are identified are those at greatest risk, and the criteria we looked at was grades, attendance, engagement, level of support at home, and need of structure or difficulties with transitional between remote and then back in-person hybrid, and then technology issues. So we looked at that criteria and then identified those students. It wasn't just IEP students or 504 students or echo-generate kids. We began the process with the middle school in Lakeville, and we are meeting again with the high school staff tomorrow, and we've already have a list of the high school kids that we're going to contact parents and invite them back, and it's a recommendation. So again, some parents may say, no, I want to stay remote, but it's a recommendation on our part, so I'll just show that. Challenges we face in FY21, accountability and expectations from PSAT, which my kids kind of referred to many times. Keeping up the pace with academics, meeting individual learning styles and needs, social emotional learning, Phil had mentioned that. We've experienced and have an increase in mental health issues, an increase in anxiety and depression, increase in hospitalizations, and concerns regarding medical conditions in at-risk populations. Staying on track, business as usual, I put a question mark there. We've always had students who suffer academically and socially and emotionally. These challenges are not new to us, but they are exacerbated by COVID-19. Teachers and students alike are experiencing a huge learning curve. A few weeks ago, Mike had talked about the teachers experiencing this year as being their first year in teaching. All of us who are educators know what that feels like, and that analogy I think is perfect. Students are receiving help in different ways, and the delivery of services may look different as well. In special ed, our staff remains pretty consistent as this slide. The only thing I had to update on this slide from last year was our paraprofessionals. This is the actual number we have, 35 currently, special ed paras. We do have a couple of TBD positions to continue to open. Our in-district population by placement, 79% of our students are fully included, 16% are partial, and I think it's 5% that are sub-separate. Next slide is just kind of a nice, pie graph of our district student population by disabilities, and there's a listed disabilities. So
what's the total district?
it's 46.
Can you just read what, I can't read any of that, like what the bigger pieces are?
It's the emotional, SLD, I can't read it either.
You want me to read it here?
Yes, here.
Yeah.
Is it neurological?
Like say the colors.
The colors are hard, actually. Starting with the brown and
Okay.
going clockwise, it's intellectual, so that's for emotional health, SLD, multiple, autism, and neurological.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice shot.
What's SLD?
Specific learning disability.
Okay, thank you.
Which is our highest percentage of disabilities in the district. The next slides are enrollment trends. So it shows 10 years of enrollment and the number and the percentage of kids requiring special ed services. So it's kind of leveled off a little bit from last year to this year.
So is the bottom the percentage?
Bottom is special ed percentage.
Just looking at
Special
the-
ed students.
That's a
and then the
number.
top is total number of students.
Okay, all right.
What's the number? I can't see the number of students this year or last year. Yeah, in the
1721 last year, and I think it's 1684 was on the slide this year.
1684.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I'm sorry. I thought that was the number of students receiving services, not the enrollment.
That's total
That's,
enrollment.
the top is total enrollment, and it's 278 students receiving services.
Yeah.
I'm not quick enough to know, oh, this is the percentage. Okay,
This is
thank
the
you.
percentage.
Oh, okay.
Got it. I was trying to do the math.
18.3.
So 18.3%. And we've been covering 18%.
Yeah, okay, so
for a
that's
few years.
interesting. At least it didn't keep climbing after FY18. Okay.
And this is the same total enrollment, and this number of students requiring 504 accommodations, and that is still creeping up a little bit.
What's 504?
It's accommodation plans for students that have disabilities.
Oh, okay, so-
Don't require specialized instruction.
Okay,
Require
thank you.
Accommodations.
Okay, thank you.
And this is just the percentage, so about 11%.
And that's not in the other number.
No, it's a separate group.
Okay. So taken together, it's 11% plus, what was the other? 18. Third. Okay. Yep.
We have our student support centers, both at the high school and the middle school. They're staffed at the high school with 3 adjustment counselors and 1 paraprofessional. At the middle school, 2 adjustment counselors and 1 teacher. The student support center services all students, regardless whether they're on IEP or 504 or no plan at all. Students can access the student support center for crisis management, daily check-ins, adjustment counseling, organizational support, specialized homework, transition support from long-term absences, and for a separate center for testing. In-school suspension is also held in the student support center, not now, but before. And we view it as an intervention post-student discipline. High school students can also access the SSC if they're enrolled in online classes through grad environments.
So before we leave this,
Sure.
so I just want to be sure I understood what you said in the previous slides, that it's nearly 30% of our kids are either on a 504 or IEP.
And that actually interprets that 30% of our students have a disability.
Okay. Great, thank you.
So this slide, I had asked school adjustment counselors to give me some information that might be specific to what they're hearing, what they're feeling, what they're seeing. And what they're saying is that some students are actually thriving with the stresses of physical environment eliminated, and they are choosing remote only. Some struggling greatly because of the lack of resources remotely and the inability for students to be in person 5 days a week. Students report feeling isolated on a computer all day. They're starting to see increase in symptoms due to seasonal triggers. Many students are struggling with motivation overall. Many students scheduled to access the student support center for study halls are fully remote, so they're not accessing the SSC. Issues consistent amongst students struggling with the schedule and feeling overwhelmed, and struggles with navigating Blackboard, no uniform way of using it from teacher to teacher. Emerging trend appears to be a significantly higher number of students having crisis evaluations resulting in inpatient hospitalizations and or partial programs. Some of these students are students who are on the SSC radar, many are not. From September 2019 to March 2020, we had 13 total inpatient hospitalizations or partial programs. From September this year to November 17th, yesterday, we already have 11 students who have been inpatient or attending a partial program for mental health concerns. So we can absolutely see the impact of COVID is having on our kids. The next couple of charts are just the statistics of kids accessing the high school SSC, which is climbed in the years. We're up to 135, which is about 12% of our students. And the middle school statistics pretty extended from the 2 years. The in-school suspensions are down, and that's because we were closed in March. The next slides are just an overview of student services financial overview. That's a pie graph with the salaries, the consultants, the private and the Blackboard tuitions, transportation, legal services, testing, assessment, and other. And then the next slide is a different view of that with the same information but with more detailed expenses. The next section is on our school counseling department. We have a director of school counseling, Dr. Irene Doros. Our middle school, we have 3 school counselors and 1 registrar, and the high school has 5 school counselors and 1 registrar. The overview of the counseling department is a comprehensive, preventative developmental counseling program that services all students, that foster student engagement and success in 3 domains: academic, college career, and social emotional. This is just a diagram of those 3. In the academic responsibilities and the roles of the counselors, they meet with each student individually, they discuss the academic counseling, they provide metacognitive strategy instruction, organizational and study and test-taking skills. They help students deal with failure, learn resiliency and self-advocacy, course selection and 4-year plan development, exploring different academic pathways, communication with families, collaboration with school personnel. They facilitate 504 meetings and they review quarterly grades, semester GPAs, and prepare academic transcripts. In the social emotional domain, they again meet with each student. They educate students on understanding themselves and others. They teach coping skills, foster peer relationships, teach communication, problem solving, decision making, conflict resolution, prepare students for transition after high school, challenge students to explore new opportunities, help students to identify individual strengths and interests, and assist with adjustment to high school. In the college and career domain, again, they meet individually with students. They provide career exploration and connecting academic interests and skills with the 21st century workforce, show relationship between career interests and college majors, college application and financial aid process, and host over 135 college representatives in the fall. I think that looked a lot different than the typical times this year as well. Irene is also our homeless coordinator, and those are our numbers for this year. Or starting this year is 1 student is homeless and 2 are in foster care. Our health services staff, we're very fortunate to have 2 high school nurses this year, 1 nursing assistant, and then 1 nurse at the middle school and 1 nursing assistant at the middle school. I don't know if you remember this slide from last year, our previous presentations, but the COVID bubble, that used to have to be triage, but we now created a COVID bubble. And so the model of our health services are case management, crisis response, professional collaboration, preventative screenings, and now COVID. Our nurses manage students with life-threatening allergies, and the numbers updated are those that represent the students that have these conditions. Asthma, diabetes, seizures, they manage the concussions, they work with family and health providers to develop individual health and emergency plans, temporary accommodation plans, they review emergency cards, and they maintain complete and comprehensive health records for every student. In the crisis response domain, they report to medical calls to classrooms, they maintain emergency supplies and equipment, they're a member of the building crisis response team, permanent and temporary evacuation plans they provide, safety evaluations, and also staff trainings. In the professional collaboration, they are part of and attend IEP and 504 meetings as needed, have one-to-one conversations with counselors, participate in expert, they go to re-entry meetings, SST meetings, RTI meetings, they collaborate with the athletic department regarding concussions, they communicate with outside health providers and work with community agencies to help support families in a variety of ways. Our new COVID bubble, right now, the nurses participate in bi-weekly COVID emergency response teams with Tri-Town Union. They are an integral part of the district COVID response team meeting. They assisted in the development of COVID-specific protocols for staff and students. They developed staff COVID training. They're in nearly daily communication with local boards of health, nurses, and agents, and they assist local boards of health in identifying close contacts. The nurses, all individuals are screened for COVID symptoms prior to entering the health office. A separation isolation room for students with COVID systems was set up and staffed by nurses. The nurses review absentee reports daily to identify student staff that need follow-up. Nurses work closely with families to provide further direction regarding isolation, quarantine. The nurses track COVID-like illnesses, close contacts, and confirmed cases. And the nurses respond to multiple questions and concerns related to COVID. I just want to add that having the second nurse on the ground, providing the direct services and working in the health office has been a huge assistance, and I think a great decision in adding that person this year with those added responsibilities in the work. So I think we made the right decision.
Patty, have they used those isolation rooms at all? Has there ever been like a case they have?
I didn't get a number on that, but I have seen just a lot of travel around the building. I think I've seen once or twice.
A couple of times, and again, we haven't had an active case
right.
necessarily,
So it didn't result
but
in
if
that.
a student presented with symptoms, that's where they go. So.
Okay.
Right, and I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's the. Yeah, I did see one student.
We recently set up an overflow isolation room.
Oh,
so there's one in each school and the locations that you saw on the tour. And then just last week, we identified a third location.
Is that your office?
I can work from home.
Sorry, where is that?
That's just inside door number 29 near the wood shop.
Oh, yep.
The next office.
So near another exit so that they can.
Yeah. And that's if we would have more than one student in a building.
Is that the room with the biohazard sign that I was asked to
Yes.
go to at dinner tonight?
That's probably why, yeah.
I noticed a new sign. I was asked.
So our ELL, our English language learners, we do have staff. We have an ELL coordinator. That's a mandate that we have to have that position, even though we're a low incidence district. And we have one ELL teacher. The ELL coordinator responsibilities obviously is to oversee the program, provide data for SIMS reporting, evaluate ELL teachers, guidance to individual classroom teachers and guidance counselors, monitor students on an individual basis, attends meetings as necessary, and maintains LEDA and access testing, provides dictionaries for MCAS, and monitors academic progress of former L students for 4 years after students stop receiving services. We currently have 89 teachers who are SEI endorsed, 0 that are in the course, and 14 teachers that are not endorsed. We also have Title I program and funds. This is a financial assistance to state and local educational agencies to meet the needs of at-risk children. And it provides instructional services and activities which support students in meeting the state's and challenging standards, and funds received are based on the share of low-income students, but a child does not need to be low income to access the program. We currently, through the grant, fund 2.16 FTE teachers through the grant. And I wrote the grant this year for literacy, so to increase our literacy skills. So that's the focus. Criteria for eligibility for Title I services, we look at MCAS scores and also teacher recommendations. Typically, we have 70 to 100 students per year that meet criteria, and typically about 50 to 60 students accept the services. And I should specify that it's the middle school that's the Title I school.
Can I have that? What makes the middle school Title I? I don't remember. Like, or why is the high school not a Title I?
It's a percentage of students who are designated low income, actually.
Low income? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. It's not MCAS scores or anything like
No.
this.
No,
Is just
that's our
about
criteria to provide
For
services.
eligibility for
Yeah,
students.
which is separate, but not for the
they're
designated.
They're designated based on the number of students that are low income.
Oh, okay.
And actually, for the first time, we were over the 5% low income, and that's why our Title I grant increased this year, because we were always hovering at like just under 5%, but we were over. And that was for the 2019 census.
Okay. Huh. Thank you. It's like a dream when you can't get to the last slide of your presentation. A nightmare.
And I'm going back.
It is. Going backwards? Hit the right arrow. Hey,
There we go.
Excellent.
You could have made that one up.
Fix it.
So that was a whirlwind of information, and I was trying to go through it fast, but just trying to serve every student.
I don't know if you guys are doing enough. I mean, this is crazy long.
So, and we are getting an update from Irene in the near future.
Yeah, so I think we figured that was going to be probably the first meeting in January.
Okay, yeah.
Because 2 meetings in December, we're going to have the high school school advisory council present their school improvement plan. And the second meeting in December, the middle school advisory council is presenting their plan. And so then Irene will be the January 6th.
Okay. And Patty, I just had it, you mentioned that there were 2 open para positions, I think. Like, is that because you, 3? Is that because you can't find people right now, or?
It's like impossible.
Okay.
Where you and I were trading some emails.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got postings for the paras, we've got postings for the monitors, and we've got postings for the proctors. And I think in the over the last 2 weeks, we received one application, I think, for all 3 postings. So.
How are we covering the classes where the teacher is teaching remotely? Yeah, how are we doing that? How's that going?
So we have 13 proctors, and we've got 38 paras, and it's all hands on deck. And I'll defer to you, Mike, but it's administrators and teachers that are.
So similar to what was going on when we first went into hybrid, is you're still in the same boat?
Yeah, we're still in the same boat where it's, trying to figure out who's here and who's not. Because as I said, there are people who are quarantined and not quarantined and coming back from quarantine. And so, there are, we've set up desks actually in both cafeterias now. And so that tends to, we can maybe have 1 or 2 proctors and multiple classes in there at the same time. It's really.
Yeah, so you have the predictable part, which is the folks that are on accommodations, whether they're a full accommodation, they're working fully remote, or they're on a childcare accommodation, for example, and they're working, remotely Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And we can plan for those things, but it's the situations where, like Mike said, the staff are beginning to either have to self-quarantine or
just personal illness.
Yeah.
The regular
we would have
stuff.
normally had
So you've
just
got
normal
those,
sick days.
you
So what
get
do you
both
do
of
with
those
kids?
things going on, and the second The variable piece, that second piece, that's the unpredictable one, and that's the one that we're dealing with every day as a fresh day, every morning that we come in to try to fill those holes.
Right. Yeah, and the department heads have been doing a great job doing that, every morning, trying to puzzle together a schedule for the proctors and to make sure that, the students who are in the building have a place to go that's covered.
So some days you'll see in the large CAF, it'll be empty. And on other days when there's an uptick in either the personal illnesses or the folks that need to quarantine, you'll see more kids in the large CAF kind of being assisted by a single proctor.
Okay.
In some cases, if there's a paraprofessional assigned to the classroom, and I know because the time sheets came in today, that, they're covering the class too. So again, we use hands on deck.
Right.
So if there happens to be a para in the classroom,
Using those
we'll
two.
ask that para.
Okay.
Yeah. We had the assistant principals a couple of weeks ago kind of go after the changes that we saw with students who are opting for the full remote. We had the assistant principals go back through the class rosters to make sure, I heard stories of, classes of one with a proctor, and we're like, we can't do that. That student needs to go to the cafeteria and have, be in there with multiple classes. And so we went and looked at all those, any class that was one or two or three like that we could, move to do that. That's what we did.
Okay, smart. Yeah. Kristen?
So I have probably 2 or 3 questions for Patty. You didn't talk about this in the presentation. I know we talked about it last year when we talked about school choice and we were accepting some school choice students in. Do you know percentage-wise what basis of school choice students who choiced in might have also special education needs that would be potential?
I don't have the exact numbers, but I do know that several IEPs, but I don't have it.
Okay. My second question is sort of about just in general the performance of our special education students at this point in the year. I certainly have been hearing some feedback from people in the community and in my own personal experience. We talk about sort of the ebb and flow of the way the school year might go, and a lot of kids tend to start the year stronger and run into walls later in the year. Can you talk a little bit about how I know we probably have stronger data from high school since grades just went out than we do necessarily from the middle school, although we're getting close. Can you talk about how students might be performing sort of compared to their past in terms of typical performance, where you might have students who struggle and are maybe B- range? Are they performing on par, or are they underperforming based on where they would likely perform?
I would say that we have probably like a couple of two groups of kids that probably were in the DEF range before COVID and just struggled academically. I'd say the second group are struggling more. So I would say yes. I think that in speaking, I just met with the coordinator for high school this morning, and yes, the kids are struggling more, and that's why with the grades, and we are seeing more D's and F's than we typically do. And that's why I've been going through the exercise and working with the principals of needing to get the kids back in person. I think that is what they need, and that's what the coordinators have been sharing with me, is to try to get more kids back. Again, we deal with the puzzle of the capacity, making sure that we're not exceeding the class size, that we're maintaining the safety guidelines for distancing. So, as I said, we have lists of kids that are struggling most, and that criteria I showed as far as grades, that is one of the first criteria we look at. It's concrete, but then it's a combination of things. So when we set up those 7 criteria, we were really looking at kids that had 5 of the 7 criteria, saying those are our at most risk kids, and then moving there. I find this to be a very fluid process, Kristen. I think that we probably didn't anticipate or want to anticipate that kids would struggle as much. as they are, and we're finding that they are. So we're recognizing that and trying to, give them the support, what looks like the best support for them. The concern I had as well was the hospitalizations. And I know that I'm hearing that kids are like in emergency rooms waiting 2 or 3 days for a bed. And so this is having a huge impact on mental health. I mean, I think if we just across this room, we're probably all saying we're much more stressed on a daily basis during this time frame. But for our kids, I think that is very stressful. So that's the work I have to do right now, is to work with the principals, work with the department heads too. I think it's a matter of how we go into, in one of my slides, I think one of the challenges was meeting the individual needs and learning styles of the kids. So it's working with my colleagues, with the department heads and the teachers to say, yes, we need to modify the expectations. We know we have DESE up here looming, but let's be real and, let's support the kids. So.
Okay. One last question, and this maybe Mike, I don't know, maybe you answered, maybe Patty, but you mentioned the introduction of the wind block into the current schedule. So if I understand it correctly, it's most likely going to be sort of waterfall through the schedule, if that's what you had talked about at one point. If that coincides with someone's academic support period or a period when they're getting pulled, a student might be pulled for services if they don't have a support period or something like that, are they going to still go towards their academic support rather than dropping it for a wind block?
They would still go, if it's during that period, they would go to the scheduled service. And then on the other day, that it's an open, that maybe it's not something, and then they have a choice, and then they could get an additional, academic support or learning lab, or go to the teacher that they need the most support from. So they have a lot more flexibility.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
That was actually one of my questions. Well, my question was, when are some of the things happening that you talked about that the guidance and the counseling services are doing, typically would do? When are those fitting in now? But then I kind of reframed it as, are those things that will be falling into the window? Yes, when that happens. So that would probably help with a lot of things, kind of just trickle.
Well, I think that the guidance counselors really did use the wind block so that they didn't have to pull a student out of a learning environment. During the time there hasn't been a wind block, they're still servicing the student, and program is still occurring. It's just that they might be pulling the student from another time frame.
I have a question. So one question also, when you just talked about the increase in some of the mental health concerns, I don't know, I'm just curious if you might know off the top of your head whether that data feels consistent with what might be what you're probably seeing across the state. Yeah. I mean, it would be my assumption.
I would even broaden it to national.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a colleague meeting last Friday, and we're all saying the same thing.
I have a friend who works at Children's Hospital, and she said they're totally overrun with kids in crisis. Yeah.
So the last question kind of layers over a couple of things, but just you mentioned in there about one of the stressors being on Blackboard, a specific part of it not feeling consistent teacher to teacher sometimes, and that's sort of like a bigger thing, because I do think we've asked so much of teachers, and the reason that we're noticing that there might be different ways that teachers are setting up their Blackboard is because everything's on Blackboard now, whereas when we had in person, they had their classrooms, so you didn't have to lean on that so much. Is that something that, over the coming months, nothing immediate, but is that something that can be, how do we go about, I don't know, it's something that I've started hearing over the last 3 weeks or so, and I've heard it several times, so it's become kind of a recurring question.
That was like the inconsistencies between classrooms on Blackboard, like homework is hard to find, or like, is that weird?
Yeah, I'm gonna face away from you, Carolyn, because I learned that when I don't face the microphone, and my sound doesn't get picked up.
Oh, okay, I won't take it personally.
So, but, yeah, I haven't heard the issue in my own home, and I haven't really explored Blackboard deeply myself. So I'm just totally anecdotal, but what I've heard from other people is it sounds like what you just said, like, when you're going onto Blackboard, if each teacher has it set up, if certain things are more consistent for a student with, like, you know, executive organizing challenges, that alone becomes a big point of stress. Just figuring out where to submit your assignment or where to find the assignment. So I'm usually a big proponent for let each teacher do it the way that works for them, because I think that's part of the beauty of having excellent educators. But now I'm hearing this enough from kids who, when they're in a remote environment, are so reliant on this interface, this virtual space. So it's just a question. I don't necessarily expect an answer right now. I just wonder if it's something that is possible to even be looking at. I'm not familiar enough with Blackboard to know if it is.
And I would say that section that comment, it came from the school adjustment counselors, from feedback they were getting from kids. So I think that what we need to do is take that information and then inform the teachers, and then see how we can make it more uniform and consistent. I do think that there's different teaching styles, just like there's different learning styles, so I think we'll see that.
Yeah.
You know, but I think as far as access and equal access points, I think we probably work towards making sure that there's a consistent approach there. But yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the teachers have all had the same training, they have,
Right.
you know, but there's also a spectrum of comfort and, you know, knowledge and tech savviness and things like that, so.
Okay, anyone else? Did you have anything? Okay. Thank you, Patty. Who does all the, do you do all the graphs on there? That's pretty impressive.
No, I have to thank Elaine Cavatorta.
Okay, thank you, Elaine, that's impressive.
She worked hard for me the last couple of days. It wasn't a long turnaround time with it.
Oh, yes, I heard, okay. So I'm gonna move on to item G, the school resource officer agreement. So first of all, I just wanna say that we are very happy with the role our SRO has at the school. This agreement is solely relates to funding that position. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that that's what the agreement is about. It's just about dollars. The SRO role is provided by police departments in our towns. Historically, this role hasn't been equally filled by the 3 towns, and it's generally been more filled by Boxford. So last year, during the budget process, the town of Boxford asked Masco to consider reimbursing them for the staff time that's been involved with having an officer here on campus. So in response to that request, Jeff came up with an intermunicipal agreement working with the towns because the actual funding needs to be agreed upon by the 3 towns, not by Masco, or in conjunction with Masco, but everyone had to agree on the arrangement. So Costa has also helped draft this agreement and get it through or in front of all 3 towns, and there has been general, or I would say full agreement with it. There's just one more step. The agreement itself refers to another MOU with the SRO that just needs to be updated. It lapsed, and we just need to update it. So it's a technicality, but right now the way the agreement reads, it refers to a outdated, expired MOU. So Jeff, you said that you've talked to Boxford and they're working.
Yes, so I spoke to Chief Ryder this morning, and we talked about what needed to be done, and he graciously agreed to quarterback it for us. So hopefully we'll get some minor tweaks into the MOU by the end of the week. All 3 chiefs need to sign it, and then Mike needs to executed, and then we can update the IMA with
This
that
one.
new
Okay.
date,
Okay.
which hopefully will be either this Friday or early next week, and then we can circulate the IMA to the 3 boards of selectmen and then back to the school committee, and then it'll be executed.
Okay, so we'll do it at the end of that.
That's what I would recommend.
Okay. So in the interest of making the next time we bring it up really quick, does anyone have any questions on the agreement that was attached? Because the only thing that's going to change is a date.
Well,
Maybe?
not necessarily, the intermunicipal agreement from its original drafting did not include any reference to the MOU.
When did that get added in?
Must have been added by Topsfield. So item D, where it refers to the MOU of August 28th, 2019, was not in the original draft. So depending on what the MOU says, which, I haven't seen the 2019 MOU, so I don't know what it covers, but I'm saying.
So the MOU basically covers, it was a document that was prepared in conjunction with the Attorney General and several police chiefs a couple of years ago, and it's basically a standard document that each town or city or regional school district kind of uses as a boilerplate and then executes in accordance with their local governance. So it covers governance, it covers identification and hiring of the SRO, it covers evaluation and training of the SRO, and some of those things that you would think would be in a document like that, and then it's executed typically by the chief and the superintendent, because together the chief and the superintendent kind of manage the SRO and select the SRO and all those things.
And I wouldn't think that the 3 boards of selectmen would have any issue with what is in the MOU as long as it is not changing anything financial that's covered in intermunicipal agreement.
Right.
It doesn't talk to money at all.
There's no reference to money. However, the IMA, the copy that I saw that had been signed by the Topsfield Board of Selectmen referenced this particular document, which had expired. And then I brought it up to Carolyn and Mike.
That, things like that, from the beginning that sort of aren't quite right, and that's why the original intermunicipal agreement was drafted as a potentially 25-year agreement, and that's why it was shortened to 1 year. And then the town administrators and Masco can work toward drafting something that is more appropriate for a long-term document.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions or concerns about this? We did budget for the cost of us reimbursing the towns. No, it doesn't matter to us who that all does, but.
And that's accurately reflected in the version that we're referring to now.
I mean, the numbers have been consistently, the same for this current year. It didn't really address how, certain things that, I think in a long-lasting agreement need to be addressed so there are no misunderstandings in year 12.
Right?
Okay. All right, I'm going to move on to subcommittee reports. Speaking of old agreements, I'm sorry, policy. This is up first, Melissa.
Okay, so I asked for the attachment of 3 documents to agenda so that we could take sort of first. We had postponed our meeting that we were supposed to have yesterday at 4, because as a committee we had agreed to sort of reach out to our respective town, or the towns. Costa's helping us with that, with Middleton, and then Terry and I for Boxford and Middleton Boxford and Topsfield respectively. And we haven't, I don't think, quite got to full in-person conversation with Topsfield and Boxford. Costa sort of has a handle on the things that are happening in Middleton. So our proposal is to make amendments to the district agreement this year, and to at least, at a minimum, bring what is more cleanup. So if you open the proposed amendments document, this was actually presented last year in February before we had to look at other things, I believe, and this is what was worked on with last year's policy subcommittee. So we haven't made any changes to this document since then. But I just wanted to have everybody refreshed with it and sort of understand it, because I think it's something we're going to have to talk about for the next few months, as we decide whether or not to ask for just the small housekeeping changes, and then when to ask for the more big ask, which would be changing the how we apportion our costs and look at 5-year averages, and then also requesting that the towns pay the district monthly for their costs, or their, my brain's not working.
Funding. How often do they do that now?
Quarterly.
Quarterly, so going from quarterly to monthly funding, is that what you're?
It used to be semi-annually, and then when the state allowed communities to bill the taxes quarterly, there was an amendment done to pay the assessment on a quarterly basis instead of the semi-annual basis.
Okay. Is it quarterly, like in advance, or in arrears? Like, so if you go to monthly, will they have the cash on hand?
So it's 25% by September 30th, and it's kind of written that way. So they could send it to us in July, or they could wait.
So, okay, so
September
in theory, they
29th.
would have the cash from, like, so the quarterly tax payment that the residents pay,
Yeah.
that's what they will use to pay us on a monthly basis for the next 3 months?
I would assume so.
It's
but
not okay. Well, I'm just wondering, Melissa used the words, and I know why you did, like the bigger ask in amending this, and I don't see that these two requests as, I actually think in some ways it might work out better, especially the enrollment percentage change for the towns, and in getting a better feel or less of a surprise every time, yeah.
I agree.
So, yeah.
So, and those two, aren't housekeeping, but they are not major changes either. The bigger conversation, I think it would revolve around, intermediate capital funding, not the big, 2.5 override funding, but the smaller, $1 million needs that gets, in the recent past have been split into, put on a warrant and, appropriate among the towns. Getting something that might work to the advantage of everyone in keeping the facility updated and current, and give longer life to the investment than the system that's in place now. I think that's the most important conversation. There may not be a better agreeable system than what we've been doing, but I think that conversation needs to happen to see, can we come up with something?
So the edits in the one that Melissa sent out don't address that?
Not-
Do they, but they address the enrollment?
And the payments,
And the-
quarterly.
The
So
quarterly.
those, two things, I mean, I would, if I was running, the show, I would say, send to town, look, we're gonna do an amendment. These are the housekeeping things, basically taking out useless language that doesn't apply anymore. And we're also considering these two. Let's, have, your input on these two. And I think it will be a short conversation in each town to come up and say, and end up with, yes, we have no problem with it. And then that would lead into this other capital conversation that might take, I think it will definitely take longer conversation to come up with a different system. If there is no appetite to talk about it, you'll get a very quick no.
And when I say bigger asks, I don't necessarily mean like if they're asking, they're not, in my opinion, they're just making a change that's not, that we haven't done we've never done.
Yeah.
So there's gonna be some people who look at it and say, yeah, that's a great benefit, but then there's some people who say, let's not change something
Change
that's
is bad.
always worked,
Yeah.
and we all know that that's how our towns are. So we just have to, sort of get everyone on board and have the process, which we've started, but we weren't quite ready to be there and meet all together. So I think what will happen is once we've all had our conversations with our individual towns, then we'll invite everyone to a policy subcommittee meeting to sort of discuss them.
Like including the people from the towns, hopefully. Yeah. Okay. And then for the third thing that you were talking about, Costa, the capital project funding, is like, do you have ideas to share? Like, have you guys talked about alternatives, or are you just talking about it in theory, big theory? Big picture?
No, that's the question I had as the person who will go and talk to Boxford, is just what that is. That I just, part of it is just my own lack of experience on the committee, but I just don't know. I don't know if this is the right place to talk about it, but maybe you could even come to a policy subcommittee meeting to talk it through. I just don't have my head around it, I think.
And we have to sort of talk about that at a DCI meeting too, right? Because that's how we're going to incorporate that conversation, sort of.
I mean,
and have a plan. They're looking for a plan before we, I think. I don't know. It's just.
Yeah, yes, I could say if you're just talking in the abstract, they're not going to be ready to talk about how to fund it. They want to know what they're signing up for.
Well, what DCI would be talking about, this is, the big project, what, we want to do, when we want to do it, and what the ramifications, financial ramifications are. And that's, no one will suggest that, we change the current system if all three towns approve, $30, $40, $50 million project. What I'm talking about is whether that project happens or it doesn't happen, there are sort of more significant capital needs, like, making a major repair on the roof, that was one of the items. Right now, that would get done by being on a warrant and all three towns approving their portion of it. And I'm saying, can there be a system that's agreed on that doesn't necessarily, that deviates from that? To get something that everybody agrees is necessary. And, when I first became a selectman, the Middleton tradition was that any new position would be added and funded by a warrant article at town meeting. And no position, no matter how much it was needed, ever passed. So then we started saying, okay, if all the financial people, the selectmen, the FinCom, the town administration agreed that we needed to add a policeman, the policeman was added to the operating budget. It was identified, and so the town meeting voters knew that there was a new position in the budget, and lo and behold, it passed. So seeing if we can come up with, a system that if the financial, people of the towns and the district, look at a facility need, it can get, it'll have a smoother road to passage than the current system.
I think without having specific ideas of what that would be a hard conversation for me personally to have, if it is up to me.
I have an idea of how it could work, and I've expressed it at the school committee meeting before.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, say there's $1 million worth of work that Masco's proposing. That gets, looked at, town finance committee saying, that's a good use of money. It'll help, preserve the asset and all that. But, we don't think that, $1 million is a bit much. We'd rather, you spend $800,000. Then, if Masco says, okay, we'll go forward with the $800,000 number that, all the towns agree is what's affordable and necessary, then it takes two out of 3 towns to pass, just like an operating budget. If Masco wants, that said that the $1 million is what's needed, it can go forward with the $1 million, but then it needs 3 out of 3. Now, that may not be an ideal system, but I think, you can start around that idea, you can start talking about it, and then maybe somebody else has a better idea.
Okay. Yeah.
And it kind of, preserves the ability of a town not to sort of have a veto over it, because it's okay, we think it's great, but we can only afford our share of $500,000. So there is that element that's preserved. But if everybody agrees that, all of those people agree that $800,000 is the necessary amount for the work that's being proposed, then it's like, the police officer in Middleton that would only get passed if you presented it in this way. If you presented it that way, it fails. The need is still there.
Well, it's more like the operating budget as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
This might be a really naive question. It's probably been discussed before, but could there be an agreement to have a regular contribution to a capital fund that Masco would then administer ourselves? Is that, I don't know how these things work, but could that be
The agreement could be anything.
Okay.
That, I'm not sure would.
Then the towns would have no say-so over what, okay. All right.
We would like that.
Yeah, I was like, okay,
So
there's gotta be.
The answer is yes.
But-
The committee could establish a specific account, and then the committee could look to contribute to that account each year through its operating budget.
Okay.
But it would have to be approved through the operating budget process, which involves town meetings.
Right.
So that would be the kind of mechanism for.
Okay, and it would have to be a change to the operating budget, which
Would have to be included in specific.
0% doesn't cover a change to the.
And that has not, has not
Yeah,
been
okay.
done. So if we
I was
want
just
to
thinking, yeah.
go that route, there would need to be a change.
Right,
That's
yeah, I
something
was
that's
just,
approved.
yeah.
And that, I'm, without some guidelines that sort of set limitations on it,
Yeah.
I don't think that town
Yeah,
governments would be,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
overjoyed with supporting
Yeah.
something like that.
Maybe if there was a second part to the process where you make a proposal that this is how you'd like to spend the money and then, but anyway, just throwing that out there. Yeah.
That, you know, discussion, you know, if it can take place and have, you know, an agreement, you know, come around would be a benefit. And I think now is the time, you know, to do that, because I think the relations between the committee and the various town selectmen and FinComs is at a fairly good point. You know, when 7 years ago, when I first came on the school committee, a Topsfield school committee member said to me at a meeting, at a public meeting, that, you know, our job is to, you know, to spend money. Your job is to give us everything we want. And there's been a big change in attitudes, you know, since then.
So I think
Okay.
we have to start the conversation, and I think we have to start the conversation with these changes to start with, but we just have to determine what the appetite is from Oxford, Towson, and Middleton to go that next extra step. But when it's before them, in my opinion, that's when you can start the conversation. So I think we've started those conversations, or we're in the process of starting those conversations. And I hope that we can accomplish this sooner rather than later, especially since we've had sort of the towns talking over the SROs, and I just think it's a good time. And there's going to be other reports this year that show us what our needs are as a district for our capital needs. I think it's later this year, right? The spring?
We're gonna do some work to
Yeah.
get to that point,
Yeah.
so, but not in the spring,
But later, but in this foreseeable future.
in the future.
Okay.
Future's
So-
good.
So I would request that we're going to try to have our next meeting in the evening so that more people can attend who maybe want to. And so I'm gonna work on a date, and Terry and I will set it. So there's that. So this is the district agreement.
Okay.
The next update we have is with mask, and I'm gonna let Terry give that update because she's taken over that role for us.
Sure. So really quickly, so this is the policy review with MASC. The subcommittee met with Dorothy Presser from MASC last Thursday. Subcommittee plus Jackie, who is going to be continuing to come to the meetings to give support and contribute. So we met. Jeff has read the contract and sent it or will send it to Carolyn to sign. He's also made arrangements for the initial payment of $1,700 that's due on signing. Jackie has sent the current documents to MASC, and our first official meeting is December 15th. We're going to be meeting, so that'll be a second subcommittee meeting every month. And it'll be a 2-hour meeting where we go through policy by policy. And we're anticipating that if we stay on track and we don't run into any roadblocks, that we can do this in a year. So we've set out our schedule of meetings, which we can, I guess Melissa will convey that to everyone. So that's where we are with that. And thanks to Jackie for her help.
Terry, how often did you say about this meeting?
We'll do the policy review meetings monthly, but then there'll be another, like a regular policy subcommittee meeting as well.
It's the
So it'll be
second one.
I'm sorry, yeah, I can, second Tuesday of the month, starting in February. The December and January meetings are also Tuesdays, but slightly different. I'll circulate the dates for those meetings. Is that okay? Yeah, okay.
So I have the contract in front of me for me to sign. Yes. Did you read through it, Sarah?
Yes. It doesn't really look like a contract, it looks like a proposal, but she confirmed that that's what you, I mean, it's,
Yeah, I
that's
just
what
want
they
to make
want
sure
you
it's what you saw. And
Yeah.
is Jackie the liaison officer that they refer to? Okay.
Yes.
And then they also, this just screams Glenn Kuchar to me, have an exhibit about MASC binder specifications and how they're going to use a sturdy loose leaf binder with 3 heavy duty
Oh, I don't know if
metal
I-
D-rings. Do we need a
We're not doing
binder?
paper.
We don't want anything on paper,
We told them
right?
we don't want
No,
Okay.
I should, can I look at that before we go to just make sure it's the same document that I saw? I think it is.
Sure.
It's just a,
I didn't see
it
any
is, I think.
binders in
I
It's an
didn't see
exhibit.
anything about binders
I mean,
either.
I'm happy to sign it, but.
Yeah, I just want to make sure, because,
I don't want to start a binder that's going to get thrown out.
no, I think they
No, we
have
told
some
them.
regulation where they have to give us a paper copy, but we're gonna take the. It looks like
If anyone needs any empty framing binders, I have about 50 in my house.
Oh, all right, maybe I should just take a look at it too, yeah, okay,
Okay.
I'll
I'll
confirm.
connect with you
Okay.
before.
The one I looked at was good, and I approved the PO today for,
Okay, for the 17th.
so, but that
Yeah.
looks different.
This looks,
Yeah.
yeah, for
That
some
is
reason,
what I
I
would
thought,
do. Yeah.
maybe Jackie got it from Dorothy, I don't know, it's
Okay.
slightly different than what I saw, I
What
think.
I reviewed was a contract.
That's the one I want. I
Yeah,
want that one.
that's more of a
They, yeah, I
scope
mean,
of service statement or something.
yeah, yeah, I think it's just the exhibits that I didn't see, because what you get with this piece that we've bought so far is a final document in print and like a disc or, online. I guess it's not a disc, but online. We've also said we're gonna
Floppy disk?
those giant ones that we used to have it as
Like from NASA?
IBM. My son's not watching this, but if he was, we'd be highly embarrassed. Anyway, so they give you an electronic version.
Yes.
We're gonna get the hosting service, so we will not be dealing with
All right,
paper
okay,
any
I got
longer.
it.
Yeah.
All right, so I think we're all set.
Yeah. All right.
Anything else from the policy session?
It's really late. Like Chris said, it's been a long week already. It's only Wednesday. All right.
Homework for the anti-discrimination, or the anti-racism subcommittee.
Oh, for policies.
For policies.
Okay, thank you. All right, Bonnie, community engagement.
All right, so we had our 3rd listening session on Monday. We decided to try a topic, a theme. It was what could learning look like? We had about 60-ish or so people attend on Zoom, 10 people spoke, 6 parents and 4 students. So appreciate everybody that attended. Thank you to everybody who came to listen. School committee members did speak a little, but mostly listened. Initially, so the goal was to be a little bit more like long-term and kind of vision-oriented. And initially in the meeting, or right after the meeting, I was feeling a little like we weren't talking very long-term and big picture. But then after reviewing my notes and thinking about, I'm kind of an asynchronous listener, I think I realized.
Like hear things later that weren't actually said?
The voice in my head is
I need to go into that later. So I ended up, as you all received, I put together kind of a takeaways document, tying our vision, sort of summarizing the vision. We didn't start the meeting talking about the Vision 2025, but it was implied. And and looking for the threads that were happening throughout the comments that were shared in the listening session and trying to tie them back to the vision. So in doing that, I kind of, the main thread is that of making connections. Our vision 2025 is very much about teacher-student connection, adult student-to-student connection, people feeling connected to each other. Also, people feeling, students learning that subjects are not separate, that things are interdisciplinary, and seeing the relationship between subjects. So it's about, it has a lot of emphasis on parts to the whole, interconnectedness, the way that students can feel connected to the community, things feel relevant, what they're learning feels relevant to real world problems. I realized that we really were hearing a lot of this in the comments that were made. So I won't, try not to take too long. I know the document is long. I don't know if anyone had a chance to go through it, but I organized it into space and time. So connectedness and space, again, it's already come up, but Blackboard, that's the space, the virtual space that is so important for us to feel connected this year. And the comments about a lack of feeling connected to each other, mostly because of the Blackboard Collaborate, the way that the video conferencing lacks that more robust feeling of connection. It seems to have several people mentioned that. And also the design across the different virtual classrooms. But it was also said that virtual makes it easier to meet with guidance counselors, that students are finding that is an advantage, the virtual connection. Also in space, the in-person space, there were some really nice comments about expressing gratitude, about just students sharing, teachers. Everyone is very aware that the teachers are working so hard and that it's a huge challenge to work in these different dimensions with students in two different spaces. The students who are in the hybrid cohorts express being grateful for it, that it's helping them learn, that it's helping them feel focused. One parent shared that even her more introverted son appreciates having that shared experience with others, which I thought was interesting, even though hybrid is not typically very social, and maybe that's partly an advantage. It's still a shared experience, and we're all here together. That was valuable. Relating back to the vision of a learner-centered environment where learning is happening in lots of different ways, teachers are teaching lots of different ways, and assessment is happening in lots of different ways. This definitely seems to be happening. The people who spoke were describing this as they were talking about what different teachers are doing in different classes to manage those different dimensions. One speaker talked about the value of students being able to connect with each other outside of the classroom, that having study groups is helpful to students to feel more connected, having like a study group that still is virtual, not in Blackboard, not in class, but still another way to connect outside. The value of clubs. A student spoke about how clubs feeling great for feeling involved, wishing that clubs could meet in person, not only virtually, but also expressed wishing that student voices could feel more, and that students just could feel more empowered, and that their voices could feel more heard. We did take some time to picture Masco beyond the pandemic, and did speak about collaborative spaces, what has been worked on through MEF, the Mass Education Foundation, and Mr. Delani's Unimagined Spaces. The idea of like permanent club spaces with collaborative furnishings that allow students to connect with each other in kind of like a non-class time, extracurricular time. Talked about TV production, creative collaborative spaces, and I'm sure everybody looks forward to when we can do that. There was some concern expressed about 7th graders. This is actually in an email that was sent to me, someone who didn't speak up during the listening session, but I went ahead and included it. The 7th graders that are in such a huge transitional year right now, just combining all of the towns, being separated into different teams, partly away from their friends, and the added separation of hybrid, being split in half that way, and then the separation of the classes, and then the single desks in the lunchroom. That is a pretty tough formula. And wishing that the hybrid schedule had more time to breathe and more activities that revolve around community building. I think that was an excellent point. Regarding time, again, a lot of people did want to talk about schedule, talk about the hybrid schedule. But it was still coming from a place of how we use our time and how we connect to each other, and the way that time allows us to connect to each other and make connections with content as well. So they talked about the 6-period rotating waterfall schedule from previous years, in classes at different times of the day, allowing for better levels of attention, more equitable. The pace of the 7-period schedule being too fast. Several of these comments we have heard before, but it's still meaningful that we are hearing these continue to hear that want to share this with us and that we're there to listen. They talked about the value of the longer block schedule. They described the way that longer time in a class and teacher, it allows for more connection. It also allows for more kind of making mistakes and learning, it allows for just more process, which is, again, part of what we described in our vision that we're working towards. When they have more time together, one parent described it as immersive learning, to have a longer block of time for a class, that they have more time to just connect with the material. Fewer classes per day, it's also less stressful and overwhelming for everyone. The wind block was brought up, and late start, not everyone necessarily, but a student did mention again that late start is something that helps with learning and wellness and energy. A few speakers talked about the use of time, such as the flipped class model and skill mastery. And I just explained, we didn't talk very much in the listening session about what those mean, but they are just kind of different ways of using time, because the flipped model is where the content is sort of delivered outside of class or asynchronously, and then more time for connection and relationship building or connecting with the material in the class time. So it's a different use of class time. And also mastery involves more like, where students work on something until they master the skills, versus having a snapshot, which is kind of like freezing time, snapshot assessment, which is a test that tests everybody at the same time and then moves on, which sometimes creates knowledge gaps in the continuum of skill development. So parents were asking about that. They seem to be picturing that would be something that would be nice to work towards. Team taught classes such as American Studies were also mentioned. as exciting places where interdisciplinary learning is taking place. So that's where basically two different subjects or multiple subjects can be combined into one class with a different topic that's not, math, science, or art, history, or, the traditional subjects. And lastly, in the longer view of time, the speaker talked about having an actionable strategic plan that helps us to create a pathway for getting to Vision 2025 and beyond 2025. It was also shared that by embedding and allowing more creativity into our system, Masco could excel and be a leader in gifted education. So I know that was long, but wanted to just, we thought we had more time for this update tonight. But I don't know, I feel like it matters that we're hearing what people want to say from our community. At the end, we need to have another meeting to talk about what our next steps are, because I personally am feeling a little bit like a teacher going, okay, I'm not sure the format is, or I'm not sure that the format or the method that's being used right now is best to try next time. So I feel like we need to brainstorm a little bit about a different way to hold the listening sessions, but we need to talk about it. I mean, we're trying to be less formal, but maybe it's me because I'm kind of running it, and I don't know. I think it still feels very too formal.
Too formal?
It feels too formal. It feels too structured, or the group is too big. Like I feel like we need breakout rooms, or
I do that next time.
kind of like something to prompt us, and then everyone break out and talk about a generated answer to an interesting question, and then come back and share, something that's a little, what we need to talk about.
I think I get the impression that the community really likes the listening sessions.
Yeah.
No matter what format you use, I think it has turned out to be a great outlet for giving us feedback, and especially with everything going on right now. So I think it's great that you guys are doing them. I understand how you want to tinker with it a little bit, but I think it's great to keep them going.
Yeah, well, and thank you for saying that, and again, thank you. I mean, it's really the subcommittee kind of puts it in place, but then almost the whole committee is there listening, and Mike is there listening too, and that's appreciated. So thank you for taking that time, because
There are a lot of teachers on. They didn't speak, but they were listening too.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, there definitely were department heads and teachers on the call listening, and yeah, so everybody who spoke should definitely feel like you've been heard. Your thoughts have been digested, shared.
What surprised me was that there was nothing suggested that I considered really radical, consider this idea. Kind of, like, okay, take the semesters, break them into quarters, do 4 of the 7 classes in the first quarter. They have longer period of time. Do the other 3 the second quarter, and that gives you a block to do sort of a short something else. Now, I don't know if it would work from staffing points of view or flowing. If you do it first quarter, you do your first semester math, and then you pick it up again in the fourth quarter. Is that too big of a break?
Yes.
For students. But there was all kind of tinkering and no real out of the box ideas about that may work, may not work, or may lead to a conversation that gets you to an idea that does work.
Well, we didn't have much of that. That was certainly the type of conversation we had hoped to have had, but instead, I think we had the conversation the community needed to have. So even though I was initially just saying, did anybody read what we were supposed to talk about tonight? Because we weren't doing it. But the more I listened to it, it became clearer and clearer to me that we needed that conversation that night. And we will continue to need to have that conversation because, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on and there's a lot of stress and some things are working for some people and some things aren't, and they need to express that. We need to hear it. We need to work at addressing all those things. And if this helps that process even just a little, then I think it's good for us to do. And we'll, you know, like everything I hope we do, we'll certainly evaluate it and see, has the need changed? Is there a need for some other type of conversation? You know, I know we made the point after the listening session was over that we still need to do that bigger picture thinking. It might be a little too soon, but we need to keep pushing it, because if we never do, we're never going to do anything like that, and we're going to come out the other end of this without really having thought much about that, and that would be a missed opportunity. So,
all right.
So we're going to meet on Monday, November 30th at 6:30, just to discuss the best path forward.
Okay.
Yeah, and so we haven't scheduled like an actual next listening session or next other, I mean, our meetings are always public, so feel free to keep on listening to definitely attend them. I also just wanted to mention that in that summary, I did have that resource page that I had mentioned at the end of our meeting, and so there are some links there. I don't know the best, you know, I really was just putting that together for us to look at for now.
You could throw it up under the community engagement page on the website too, if you think those might be nice links that you'd want to point the community to. Jackie can help with that. Or I can help with that too. Okay, all right, okay.
Yeah, the community relations page, I can put links on there. Yeah, so I mean, if you have time, there's like some short little videos and some interesting articles and some, you know, some cool stuff happening out there that kind of does trigger some of those thoughts, like, wow, this is a time to keep rethinking the system that we're in and how we might really move forward with what we're trying ultimately to achieve and make it easier.
I mean, I think if our committee looks at some of those, maybe one or two of them would be good. You mentioned maybe prompts in the future, like that, something that everybody has looked at before coming to a listening session. So maybe we can look at them and tell you, I haven't looked at them yet, but see if there's any other.
Yeah, and we can hopefully before our next community relations meeting, at least our subcommittee, we can look at those links and see if something there seems like it would.
Okay, thank you, Bonnie. Zilly, you want to do budget?
We're meeting on December 9th at 6.
Thank you. DCI is on hold right now, and is that Costa? I'm going to move over that one. And anti-racism, Tasha isn't here, but Bill is going to do a quick update for us.
Yes, very quick update, because I have quite a tickle in my throat, so I want to get through this. Since our last meeting, we've met twice, the 9th and 16th of October. Excuse me. One of the things that we've talked about is trying to ensure that we stay at the right level. Because initially, as we were first looking at the anti-racism resolution and contemplating action steps coming from that, you know, we certainly were tempted to get a little more involved in specific things that would need to get done to do that. And frankly, we decided to pull ourselves back a little bit. Thank you. I looked for some of these before I left home tonight without success.
Nice pattern.
Thank you. I was counting on that. I'll go. So where we landed was that the appropriate level was to have a discussion with first with ourselves and subsequently with the policy subcommittee about specific either new policies or change policies that would address this. And our current thinking is based on what we have learned up to this point is that what we think we need are really policies relating to three different things. First, that there would be some minimum amount of curriculum that each student would get exposed to across each of their MASCO years that would touch upon this subject. And we certainly know now that it is happening in various classes in various ways and in various grades, but we wanted to put it out there. You know, perhaps that isn't enough. Perhaps it should be something that kids experience in their curriculum at every grade, not every class, but in every grade throughout their MASCO experience, and have it be integrated in some way. That's the first thing. The second thing is that one of the things that we had heard from former students who had reacted to hearing from teachers when they say, when the former students had said that they hadn't been taught any of this stuff at MASCO, and in fact the teachers showed where they had, it was clear that what was missing was some sort of, or any sort of experience to make what they were learning in the classroom relevant to them. So what we're considering is you know, that there should be, in addition to curriculum, but that there should be some sort of experience, and we're frankly using the term broadly, but something that would make what they're learning real to them, which what we're hearing is lacking. And the third piece of it would be professional development, that if we're certainly going to, if we're asking for this, then we need to equip our faculty to do so. So that's what where we're currently at in our thinking is having some policy or set of policies that touch upon those three aspects to this. Any questions about that? Great. So was there a policy subcommittee meeting yesterday? Was this discussed, or?
We postponed our meeting, so.
Okay. I know I couldn't make it, so. And at an earlier meeting, the November 9th meeting, we had, I believe, 3 alumni who are part of an organization called Tri-Town Solidarity Council. Because one of the other things that we've discussed is that if we're really going to move the needle on this issue, that it's got to be something in which we engage the community, and that it not be really the MASCO school committee doing the heavy lifting here. We certainly have a role in this, but that in order to really make a difference, it's got to be something where we're engaged in other members of the community, and Masco alumni to make it happen. And our next meeting, I believe, is the 30th of November.
Okay, busy meeting day. Okay. Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.
Does anyone know anything or have any updates about what's going on with the elementary schools in the community? I'll think about assigning specific liaisons. Yep, Bunny.
I can speak to it a little bit.
Okay.
At the Tri-Town Union level, in the 3 towns, there's the beginnings of talk about regionalization. Yeah, they have been working steadily over the past few years to sort of really streamline their handbook, their policies. Now they're working in the contracts to just have, at least among the 3 towns, things feeling more aligned. So I think they are right now they are at the stage of really researching what this would entail and coming back. They have a meeting in December, the Tri-Town Union Committee, and they're going to hopefully be talking about how realistic that is, and again, like the appetite for that.
One of the interesting hurdles with that, I think, will be the teacher contracts.
There was, maybe 10 years ago, when Bernie Frieden was first talking about retirement, there was a discussion. There was a committee formed to talk about the issue. I was on the committee. I think that the issues still haven't changed. It's, how do you deal with, the big difference in contract between the 2 towns is that Boxford and Topsfield subsidize 70% of health insurance, Middleton 60%. So that's a big financial difference. How do you maintain the different buildings? And there are various ages, and who does it, and how the money gets appropriated for, and what happens when there's a new building that's needed, and how much input does each community have on their particular budget and particular way of doing things. And so it's great to talk about it, and maybe some of these issues will get solved, but the probability of this happening in the next 3 to 5 years is very small.
Okay, I'm not sure how much that relates to us right now. Anything that relates to Masco that's going on in the elementary schools right now? Okay. And finally, the Student Advisory Board. I don't know if you guys have anything official you want to say, or?
Yeah, so Olivia, this is the freshman SAB, she wrote up a statement, so she's just gonna present it now.
Oh, that's great, okay.
So I've talked to people in my grade about how they feel about hybrid learning and what they think, and they say that they really enjoy being in school and seeing their friends, because having that part of life close to normal is really nice. But at home, when they're on the computer, they feel the schedule is a lot, and they feel that throughout the day they often lose focus, because having all 7 classes a day with no rotation makes it hard to learn equally in all 7 classes. And if this is only coming from people who are home half the week, then it's definitely harder for the fully remote students. And if they have to do this 5 days a week with no win time, which you said win time is being added, which I think is really good, and having a less packed schedule with more breaks would definitely benefit all the students and the teachers. And longer classes would also mean that less time is being taken out of each period to spend on taking attendance and wiping down the desks. Another worry was how the athletes would change for their winter sports, because with the weather being a lot colder, it would be harder for them to wear like their sports gear to school. So athletes would really appreciate if the locker rooms would be open just for the winter season.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's nice to have a freshman SAB here, I think, especially if you return sophomore, junior, and senior year. So thank you for coming. And Nicole, thank you for coming with her.
You're welcome.
Thank you for having me.
The consent agenda, moving on. We have the approval of the October 21st and November 4th meeting minutes and warrants of $1,638,044.70. 10 of them signed since November 4th.
Move to accept.
Thank you. All in favor? That's the only vote today. Aye. Arate, are you in favor? Still there? I don't know what you do about that. All right, I'm going to move to adjourn into executive session for the purpose of discussing strategy relative to collective bargaining with the Masconomet Teachers Association. Executive session purpose number 3. I've determined that holding this discussion in open session may have a detrimental impact on the district's bargaining position. Second by Zoe, all in favor? Raise your hand or say aye.
Roll call.
Oh, roll call,
Roll call
okay.
for
Thank you.
executive session.
Bill? Your vote?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
Joe?
Yes.
Kristen?
Yes.
Melissa?
Yes.
Bonnie? Costa?
Yes.
Zilly? Arate?
Yeah.
Thank you. Carolyn, yes. It's unanimous. All right, thank you, everybody. We're going to move to executive session and stop taping the meeting.